and turn on this mic. Okay. Test, 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 test. Okay. Because once the heater turns on, it's going to be pretty loud. The air circulation system here is really loud.
Oh, can you not turn on the heater because I won't be able to hear?
I can turn up my PA. Yeah, so I can amplify. See, I can turn this up a little bit. Would that help?
I don't know. I wouldn't turn on the heater.
Well, I can't turn it off because it's not controlled. I have no control.
Yeah, increase your volume.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with this class from last week. It's 9:05 right now. So one thing I do want to kind of repeat from last class is this class is recorded, just like most of my classes. So in order to view recorded sessions, you go to the Some Profs channel on YouTube. So SOMEPROFS is the name of the channel, and it's over at YouTube. Everything is public, once I, double check and release it. So you want to go to videos, the link, and then the classes are basically listed in reverse chronological order. So the previous class was here, okay? So if you missed last Wednesday, you can go here and watch it again. So everything that was on the projector and my voice were both recorded here. And I think that's probably best for a class like this, where the user interface is kind of graphical. So it's not like C, C++ programming, where most things are text. In this class, most things are graphical. So it's much harder for you to take notes if you're trying to write down the actual words. Okay? So are we good so far? All right. Excellent. So I do write some notes for this class, but it's very difficult to write notes, for a class where most things are graphical. So instead of focusing on written notes, I'm going to just kind of show you guys how to do things interactively. And over the weekend, I did something kind of fun. I hacked one of the emulator packages from App Inventor. So now it would actually work on a machine that you may not have administrative access to. That's the kind of thing that I like to do. So,
Are you going to teach us that today?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So let me sign into my Canvas account first.
Is there a non-web-based emulator?
Huh? The emulator itself is not web-based. The development platform is web-based. But the emulator is not web-based. Yeah.
Can you tell me what the emulator is? What are you talking about when you say emulator?
Okay, so an emulator is a program that allows your PC to pretend to be some other platform. So you can run Game Boy games on the PC using a Game Boy emulator. You can also run Android applications using an Android emulator. I'll show you.
So it's like Arc objects. Do you know what Arc
Objects?
objects is? Arc objects.
Arc objects?
Yeah. So is it like Arc objects where you use this thing to be able to adapt to a different software?
Nope.
What is it?
It's a pretender. It allows your PC.
To wait?
Okay, so let me finish first.
Okay, sure.
It allows your PC to pretend to be another computer. And it runs just like another computer. I think it's better for me to show you, the way it works. Yeah.
My question was not the emulator part, but where we're going to put in the web-based.
It's going to be web-based. There's no way around that one. But App Inventor is open sourced. So that means, you can build the server, locally.
Yeah.
So you can basically run the server locally, so you do not need to actually go out on the internet and have at least some of it done, locally. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know exactly, how easy it is. Yeah. So if you want to try that route, you're certainly welcome to, but I have not, tried that route yet. So right now I'm looking for the notes that I wrote over the weekend because there's a link in it, that is useful. So don't worry about this part. I'm gonna put the link into Canvas, so you guys don't need to look through all this stuff. So this is something that I wrote over the weekend, but I didn't have time to link it into Canvas. So that's what I'm doing right now, is to just kind of link it in. And okay, I need that one. All right, so now this is actually in Canvas. So once you sign into Canvas, you should be able to see this link now. And if you cannot, let me know, because I think it should be released, but sometimes, yeah, it should be released now. All right, so this is kind of what I wrote over the weekend. It explains what is App Inventor, what you need to get started, and the several ways that you can use in order to use this particular programming tool. So you kind of have to think about, well, we'll start with what you need. Well, let's talk about what is App Inventor. So App Inventor is web-based, which means, technically speaking, the only tool you need to have installed on the computer to start programming is a browser, okay? Although it works better with Chrome and Firefox, so I personally would not use Internet Explorer with App Inventor or anything else, okay?
Why did you say you would not use other browsers?
Because that's actually what App Inventor says.
Oh, because
So,
Inventor made it so that it was compatible with Chrome, right?
well, App Inventor was written so that it is HTML5, and conform to all the standards.
That's what compatible means.
Yep, right. And Internet Explorer is not very compatible.
But it's compatible with Chrome, right?
Yeah, that's why it has better compatibility with Chrome and Firefox. And it is a block type, development platform, which I know some of you would cringe because it means a lot of dragging and dropping and right clicking and stuff like that.
It doesn't have any real programming in it.
Hmm?
It's a teeny bit, but it's not real programming. All you do is drag all the tools onto the.
I wouldn't say it is not real programming.
All you do is configure everything. It's not really programming. All you do is configure everything.
But you haven't even tried it yet. But you haven't even tried it yet. Everything I can do with a modern scripting language, I can do in App Inventor.
A 12-year-old kid could do that.
Certain things. Exactly. You can do recursion. You can do recursive algorithms.
8-year-old kid could do that.
Well, certain aspects of it, okay? Because programming is
My
not...
daughter could
Okay,
do this when she was 2.
I bet that is the case as well. But I bet they do not understand what is recursion. And you can do recursion. Exactly. I made my point.
Okay, what is recursion?
You have to take... That's why you have to take cisp300 with this class. It is... But I'm the teacher of cisp362. That's a concept that is introduced in cisp300. I'm a teacher, but I cannot teach you basketball. So you can look it up. It's a concept that is not needed for app programming. So we'll try to stay focused with app programming in this class. So what you need is Firefox or Chrome, and I will keep it up to date. So if you have a Chrome or Firefox that's like 5 years old, it may not work very well, okay? So keep it up to date. But since both are free, it doesn't cost you a dime to keep it up to date. You will also need about 1 gig of RAM available after the browser has started. The reason why you need that much RAM is because the entire tool is being run on the browser side using JavaScript. Okay, so that's going to chew up quite a bit of memory. This recommendation is after I have observed, some people with one of those inexpensive laptop computers that has no expandability. It came with 2 gigs of RAM, and it was running Windows 7. So it had about half a gig to a gig left after the browser starts, and she was not able to do the homework assignment using that particular machine. So I do have to warn you guys a little bit ahead of time, just so that.
Something, if this is for mobile, a mobile device, we're actually creating this on a computer and then we're going to transfer it to a mobile device.
Yes,
Okay.
which is explained later. So
Okay.
yeah,
Sure.
so very good. You're definitely looking ahead of my current content. Good. All right, so you also need a Google account as the owner of your projects. Your school account will work. So your W followed by 7-digit at apps.losreals.edu account will work too. So if you want to just use that account, no problem, it will work, okay? On the other hand, if you say, well, I want my projects to be accessible like 5 years after I stop signing up for classes here, then you might want to use your personal account. Okay, now if you want to say, I don't want MIT to spam me, okay, and they have never spammed my accounts for App Inventor stuff, you can just go ahead and sign up a brand spanking new account just for this purpose. So it's up to you guys to decide. As long as it is a Google account, it's going to work. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about what else you need to get started with this class. You will need access to a Windows PC. Okay, there are several options. This is one, okay? So this applies to people who do not always have access to a Windows PC, and those people also do not have a physical Android device. Now, I just bought a $75 Samsung S7 last week, okay, because my wife was playing Pokemon Go, and she needed a device because her current Android device cannot get Pokemon Go to work. Okay, so $75, okay, would buy you a really, I would say, decent Android device, and you don't even need to make sure that it is unlocked, because you don't need 4G or 3G connection. You just need Wi-Fi or USB. Okay, so I would look into that option if having a physical Android device seems appealing to you. On the other hand, if you say, I want to spend nothing, zilch, on this class, okay, well, we got options too. So in this case, you can, okay, well, that's fine. All right, so.
You have that emulator, you just clicked on the emulator thing, so now can you explain the emulator?
I will run it so that you can actually see it, but let me finish explaining it first. So this particular page, which is linked from my module, explains how to install and how to run an emulator. Okay, so you can follow all of these steps. There's only one catch. You need to have administrator access to the Windows machine in order to install this. Okay, which of course, sorry? It means you cannot do it on the machines on this campus. If you go to a lab or if you go to the library for secure.
Create a user administrator account on your personal computer, and then once you create a user administrator account, you're allowed to install this emulator in A12 and run it. If you don't have administrator account, you can't run this thing because the administrator is the one who controls the whole computer.
Well, certain components, it wants to get use administrator access right, but I found that it's actually not necessary. So I hacked the package.
You have to be an administrator in order to install and run this thing.
But that's what I'm saying.
You cannot be anything else.
There's a different way to run it. Okay, I'll just put it that way. There's another way to run it. So if you have your own laptop computer, like many of you brought today. This should be a viable option, okay? You might want to make sure that you have extra RAM as well, because running the emulator is going to chew up more RAM on your PC, because the RAM of the emulator device is coming from your RAM, okay? From the RAM of the PC. So you can follow these instructions, and also these instructions also apply to Mac OS X and Linux machines. So if you're running... because I don't feel like repeating instruction that's already online. Because there's a link here. So you just click on this link. You just follow the link. It has very specific instruction for each.
Oh, that was a link off your.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you when you go to my instruction here in section 2.1.1, there's this link to the general discussion, and then under that there are 3 sublinks, one for each operating system. So one for Windows, one for Mac OS X, and also one for Linux. Now, but there's also special instruction here. Okay, the special instruction is you do have access to a PC, let's say a PC in the library, but the library is not going to give you administrative access because they don't want risking, the installation of, potentially harmful software. Right. So in
only the IT people in this place have admin rights.
Yeah.
Right, they're not going to give any students an admin right. You have to have your own personal laptop.
Yep.
You have to create an admin user account in order to do this.
Depends on the version of Windows.
No, you have to do it.
No. In Windows 10 and Windows 7, the default user is the administrator and can install software.
Okay, I never thought. Maybe I'm confused.
If you have the Pro version of Windows, then you have to set up a separate administrator account. So it depends on the version of Windows that you have.
I had Pro versions at work and stuff, and we had to create
That's what I said.
account.
But if you have the home version, the default user, the first user that you set up after you buy, nope, no, you do not. The home version does not need that because I have home version on multiple PCs at home, and that's my experience. Okay, all right. So in that case, okay, regardless, if you do not have administrative access, when you try to install the other way, the PC complains and say that you cannot install. In the other approach, but if you fail the other approach, then this will work, okay? Because this one only involves downloading a zip file, unzipping it onto.
It requires administrative access, right there. Right there. It says if you plan to use an emulator and app Inventor on a computer that requires administrator access to install.
Oh, I mistyped then.
Follow these instructions.
I mistyped then.
Okay.
No. This is actually correct, because if you are.
You do need administrator access.
Can you let me finish, please? Okay. So on a computer that requires administrative access that you do not have, then you have to follow these steps because you cannot get administrator access. Is that okay? All right. So this will work on a locked down computer, which basically involves downloading a file, a zip file, unzipping the file to a folder, and that folder doesn't even have to be on the PC. I would personally recommend unzipping the folder onto a jump drive. So you can take the jump drive and plug it into any machine and it will work. Okay? Before you get App Inventor, before you get into the Web Inventor website, or at least before you try to run the software, use a file explorer, okay, instance, to navigate to the folder where the content is unzipped. Double-click on the icon that says AI Starter. AI, in this case, stands for App Inventor. And the result will be a command line interface window, which is normal, okay? So look at it, and it's perfectly okay to have that. And then you can proceed normally to App Inventor to use the emulator. So,
what is the emulator?
Well, this is what I will show you now. So the emulator.
Graphical user interface?
No, I'm going to show you. All right. So the way I started the emulator here is not going to be the same as you, because this is my machine. This is command line, but you're not going to use this because you're not using a Linux box, so you would use the instruction that is included. Okay? So how many people here are planning to use a Linux box? No one. Okay, so none of you is going to follow these instructions. But there's specific instruction for each platform on the App Inventor website, so you have to follow that instruction instead. Okay. All right, so when you start, oh, this doesn't like that. I think that's because I got one running already. Okay, give me a second here to fix this problem. Yep, got one started already. There you go. So when you start AI starter, it's gonna look like this. Okay, I know it's really small, but all it says here is some kind of server running and then listening on port, listening to on http://127.0.0.1:8004 and then hit Control C to quit. You're gonna see that even on a PC or Mac OS 10. That's perfectly normal. Do not be alarmed. Yep.
So, if I was to do this on my home PC,
Yep.
what is the first thing I would enter? I see. Is it the one that's $ps.af?
No, it's the third one.
Oh, okay.
So, are you using a PC? Are you using a Windows machine?
Yes.
If you're using a Windows machine, then you go to, do you have administrator access to your PC at home?
Right click and you go to command, window, I think it is, and then you just type it.
You don't have to go that far. This is only for Linux. If you're using Windows and you have administrator access, you don't have to do a single thing. Okay? It will start up automatically when you get into App Inventor. Okay?
Okay, I got it.
So
I use the command prompt, to do the DOS shit.
only if you're using Linux.
To do the DOS stuff. Okay.
Only if you're using Linux. If you're not using Linux, if you're using Windows, this is what you will see. Okay, so assuming you go in to sign into App Inventor, by the way, the link to App Inventor is also included in the document. Okay, so this is a project that have started already, and what you do is you click.
Show us how to get in this project.
But you told me that you wanted to see the emulator.
Right, let me see you get into this.
Well, which one do you want then?
First get into this, and then show me the emulator.
Well, then I'm going to do that anyway, sequentially. But since you jumped the gun,
I can find it. I know how to do it.
okay. So the emulator is started here, because I want to show you what the emulator would look like. And on the text box, it's going to show some text here. No, this is not. The one behind it is. So
That's the graphical user interface, right? Which one is the emulator?
yeah, this is the emulator.
This is the emulator?
The one that has a
This
title.
is the graphical user interface.
It is a emulator emulating an Android device. So what?
Is a graphical user interface?
Because there's a graphical user interface running on. Can you let me finish? If you keep interrupting me, I cannot teach this class. Okay. So the graphical user interface, which is what you're seeing inside this box here, is a graphical user interface running on an emulated Android device.
Oh, so we're not going to drag and drop things on that?
No, you're not.
Or are we going to drag and drop it on the thing behind it?
Yep.
I know the emulator is the graphical thing that imitates your mobile device. That thing behind it is called the graphical user interface.
This is
All he's saying is the emulator is the thing you're building and stuff, and then the stuff behind it is the graphical user interface.
the emulator.
Lock everything off. What?
Okay. So anything that is not a command line, anything that uses a mouse pointer or touch interface is a graphical user interface. So what we're seeing here on, it is a graphical user interface, but it's running on an Android device that is emulated on your PC. So, but
It's still a graphical user interface.
yes, it is. Yes, that it is. So what we're seeing behind here, okay, let me be very, very clear about which one we are talking about. So this part here, which is running in a browser, and it is, it's going to a particular URL. This is your IDE, okay? So technically this is called an IDE, which stands for integrated. Exactly. So this is an integrated development environment, which, by the way, is also a graphical user interface. So in this class, just about everything that we do is graphical user interface, except for certain commands that you have to run on a command line. But we are not there yet, okay? So we don't have to worry about the CLI or the command line interface until much later. There are certain things. Okay, I strongly disagree with CLI being stupid. I think because there are many things that you can only do on a command line interface that you cannot do using a graphical user interface.
Isn't that like with the operating system and stuff?
Yes, but guess what Android is? It's an operating system.
No, Android, yeah, is an operating system. Oh, okay, so I see you're going to try and use the command line to...
We'll get to that later.
System of the Android.
Yes, we'll get to that later.
Okay, and this stuff is just going to be the stuff that's on the actual Android machine, the mobile device.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm deleting my only project here, and I'm going to sign out as well. So this way, I can show you guys, what you would see when you try to sign into App Inventor the first time. Okay, so in my notes, which is here, scrolling down a little bit more, in section 3, which is getting started, there's a link here. Now this link, you might think, oh, I have to navigate all the way to section 3 to get started. If you just type App Inventor one word in Google, the first link is the proper link already. Okay, so you can just Google search for that. So anyway, if you click on this link here, I'm going to start a new tab so I don't lose my actual document. You will see this page. Okay, you're more than welcome to click on the other resources here, but I'm not going to do that because my focus is to show you what you see when you get started with App Inventor. Okay, so when you want to get started with App Inventor, that's the button that you click. Click Create Apps. Is that okay? Any questions? Okay, so you click that, and the first thing it's going to do is to ask you which account do you want to use, or do you have a Google account? I have a whole bunch of stuff already listed here because I have used this browser already. So it already remembers that I have signed in using one of these accounts here, at least one time in the past. But if it is your first time using a particular browser and you haven't really signed into any Google account, it will just ask you for the email address. Okay? So what you see on this screen depends on how you have used your browser, prior to using App Inventor. Okay, but the idea is to sign into one of your Google account. Doesn't matter which one, but you might want to remember which one you use because then you can retrieve your projects. So in here, I'm going to use my school account, which you can also use. So to use a school account to sign in, you have to enter W7-digit at apps.losreals.edu as your username, and then it will direct you to the district sign-in page to finish the sign-in process. Okay. No, I do not. I graduated from a much lesser known university called UC Davis.
UC Davis?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, my last degree anyway.
What was your last degree?
It was a PhD.
A PhD?
Yep. All right, so because I haven't signed in for a while, it redirected me to the Lost Reels sign-in page, which is also normal. So once I sign in, it will direct me back to App Inventor. And it's going to look like this. So are we okay so far with what it looks like the first time you get into App Inventor? You don't have to take the survey. You can click. You can take it now, you can take it later, or you can just say never take the survey. It doesn't really matter to me. There we go. So it says, I don't have any projects yet, and So now is a good time to kind of take a look at this project view. This is the screen where it will display all your projects. You can kind of think of one project as one app, okay? Is that okay? So you can click on the projects menu, and you can see some of the items that you can do with this particular menu. And some is grayed out because I don't have any project selected. I cannot export a project if none is selected, okay? But these are the things that you can do. Obviously, the first thing we need to do here is to start a new project, okay? Because otherwise, I can't show you what's going to be inside the project. So we'll go ahead and start new project here. Click on this. And we have to give it a name. I believe the name actually can contain spaces. Okay. Oh, you cannot? Okay. You tried. Okay, so we'll just say test here. And now we have a new project. It also automatically opens the project that you have just created. That part is automatic. If you have already opened a project and you sign out and you sign back in, it will sign you right into the project that you were working on previously. So that's kind of handy because you don't have to navigate all of this stuff, once you have gotten started with a project. Are we okay with this? Okay. If you are in a project and you say, I want to stop working on this project and I want to work on another project, then you just go to projects and click on my projects, and it will back up to the projects view where you have visibility of all of your other projects. Okay, so it's easy to switch between a particular project. Okay, let me finish my sentence, please. So you can switch from inside a particular project to the project view using the projects menu. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so you said think of one project as one app. If you're thinking of one project as one app, then why don't you get out of this app and open another copy of this app when you're going into the next project? I think you misused the term app, right?
Each project will create an app.
Yeah. Well, okay, so
okay, so each project is an app. Okay, so let me try to explain what is on this particular view, okay? Each project has two main views, and you control the view using the right-hand side button on the top bar. Okay, so currently,
is where you design the graphical user interface, and the blocks is where you put the code, right? Where
yes.
you configure everything.
Well, the designer view does it.
You don't really program, you just configure stuff, right, in the blocks.
A lot of static stuff you configure. Sorry? Yep, okay. So the designer view,
Go what your original thing is, because this
I'm about to explain what the designer view does, okay? So as I explain, you guys can ask additional questions, but please give me a chance to explain it first. So there's a designer view, which is what we are seeing right now, and then there's the blocks view that I'll explain later, okay? So this is the designer view. The designer view is separated into 4 different panes, okay? P-A-N-E, as in a window pane. So the first one is the palette view, the palette pane. The palette pane itself has the user interface category, layout, media, and so on. Okay, so each one gives you, look at these as factories. Okay, so each one, if you need a button on the user interface, you click on button, and then you can place the button on the actual screen. So now you have a button in your app. Okay, so the first portion, which is all about user interface, is fairly self-explanatory. Okay, you need a button, drag and drop a button. You need a checkbox, drag and drop a checkbox, and so on. So that part is kind of self-explanatory. If you have done visual basic programming or anything like that, it's very similar to the graphical user design for.
Visual basic programming uses code, like
There's code as well here. This is just configuring, but there's also a
programming language.
We'll get to that later. So the second. Not yet. So the layout part, not in this view. We'll get to that later. So the layout,
It might be a teeny bit
Okay, just hold on, hang on. When we get to that part, we'll see. So the second category are the layout elements, which allows you to control the placement of your user interface components, okay? Without these, there's no way you can put a button next to another button, okay? But if you want to put a button next to another button, you need to use horizontal arrangement or table arrangement, okay? Depending on whether it's going to be two-dimensional or just going to control one particular role and control the positioning of things on the same row. We talked about this, all of these last week, so I'm not going to spend too much time to talk about this, but there are many components here that are not visible. That I do want to point out. Like if you go to connectivity, for instance. In connectivity, all of these are quote-unquote components, but none of these actually will be displayed on the screen. They are basically components that will give you the ability to connect.
Bluetooth, or to connect to the Bluetooth server, or to connect to the web.
Correct.
If you drag those things on, it'll automatically connect everything, but you
It
can't
not
see it on the actual
user interface. That is correct.
It's just hidden.
It is, yes,
Yeah.
it's called hidden.
Yeah.
So Activity Starter actually allows you to connect to other apps on the device. So you can actually write multiple apps and they can interconnect, they can depend on each other. Okay? So that gives you the modularity of writing programs. Yes?
Can you connect to other apps that you write?
It can connect to other apps that you write. It can also connect to apps that you do not write. So it uses the concept of activity starting in Android programming. When we get there, I will tell you guys how to do it. For instance, using an activity starter, you can start a web.
There's so many Android apps, and there's so many tons of Android apps. It's because you guys use these plug-and-play things. It's so easy to make them. I mean, that's probably why Android has more apps than Apple and stuff, because you guys use this kind of stuff.
Well, perhaps. But this gives you the connectivity from your app.
Apple doesn't hardly have any hackings and stuff, and this stuff has way more hacking than Apple.
Okay, getting back to here. This allows you to connect to other apps. It may be apps that you write, maybe apps that somebody else has written, like a web browser or maps, exactly. So it's really cool, okay? Because, if you say, I only want to focus on client information maintenance, but I don't want to deal with, the map of, how to navigate and drive to a client's address, well, leave that part to Google Navigation or whatever app that is installed on the phone to deal with that, okay? These two are Bluetooth components, and you might think, why do I want to use your Bluetooth with my phone or with my mobile device? It's relatively easy now, to design circuitry, electronics, that has Bluetooth connectivity. I have done that myself. So using the Bluetooth client or Bluetooth server, now you have ability to connect to a Bluetooth device. And depending on whether the other device is also your device that you program, you can basically implement your own protocol between the app running on the Android device and the app and the program that's running remotely on a Bluetooth device. So now you can remotely control the other device using Bluetooth, which is kind of cool. And then the last one is kind of misleading because it says web, but it's not a browser. Okay, it is intended for the app itself to make use of HTTP or HTTPS to communicate with resources on the web.
But isn't that a browser?
It's not a browser. There's no user.
All the browsers connect to the HTTP.
Okay, can you please, when I'm talking,
to the web.
can you not interrupt me when I'm done with my sentence? You can raise your hand to let me know that you have a point to make. Okay? So when you click on this, each one has a question mark to explain what it is in brief. But if you want more information, you click on more information. So this one is a non-visible component, which means it is not a user interface that provides functions for HTTP, which also includes HTTPS. But you can use get, post, put, and delete requests. Yes?
So you can pull data from a database from the web.
If you know what you're doing, yes, absolutely. So for those of you who are familiar with, what is the name?
Is that what a browser does?
A browser presents HTML documents in a way that for you to see, for you to interact with.
Yeah, but in order to call those HTML documents, you need to use the command HTTP.
That is so a browser makes use of HTTP to fetch the content to be displayed. This allows you to use HTTP requests to directly interact with servers that are not intended for end user interaction. There are many services on the web now that makes use of that.
What's end user interaction?
Like you clicking on something and you reading something. I'll give you an idea, okay? I'm not going to get into this. Before anyone asks, we are not going to get into this. OAuth 2, okay? If you look it up, it's an authorization framework that makes use of HTTP service, but it's not intended for user interface. So it is intended for a machine to authenticate to another machine and say, yes, I have been authorized to access that particular data source, okay?
So you're saying that if this is a service, right? We're calling a service to our mobile device that's going to be the browser. That HTTP service is a browser. It's a
Nope.
browser service.
Nope, doesn't have to be. A browser is only one way.
When you use a browser, you give it commands of HTTP.
Yes.
Or to call the
Yes,
data.
yes, but the logic doesn't go in both ways, okay? Because a browser always makes use of HTTP requests, doesn't mean a browser is the only type of program that can make use of HTTP requests. So this allows you to connect to web. As I said, no, don't interrupt me. Okay, okay. So this allows you to implement protocols that works on top of HTTP to allow you to say do OAuth 2 authentication.
Protocols just call things.
Yes, but it doesn't. But there's no user interface.
HTTP is a protocol.
HTTP is a protocol, which doesn't mean that it can only be used using a browser. If you click on more information.
For data, and the HTTP protocol calls that data from the server.
Okay. So, if you want to know more, okay, click on it and look at the content. Okay, that's all I can say right now at this point because this is fairly advanced type of programming. So you can see that there's a lot of resources available in App Inventor. Okay, and I can personally tell you that if you want to use these resources in proper Android programming using Java, it's going to take 2 classes, okay, just to show you the code to do the bare minimum of one of these things, okay? But using App Inventor,
It's going to wait.
it's going to take 2 classes, okay?
I know because it's more secure and it's
No, it doesn't have anything to do with security. It has
It does. This thing can be hacked so easily. This stuff is like just dragging and dropping. Anyone can hack this thing.
It is still programming, but it does make resource. Okay, can you let me teach the class? I mean, at this rate, we're going to get past like maybe 1/2 of what the class really needs to get through. So this gives you a very shallow learning curve, and it basically make it very easy to include important components so that you can focus on the user interface and the logic of your app. Okay? If you want to learn Android programming using Java, you'll be spending the first 8 weeks of a semester just to get familiarized with Android Studio, which is a monster to begin with.
No.
Yes?
Are you going to fire up the emulator?
The emulator is already up and running,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
and it has exactly the same.
it doesn't look the same as mine, but I assume you can change what kind of phone you're emulating?
No, not with this one. This is the built-in one, so it doesn't give you the ability to control what you're emulating.
Okay, but it's not just Screen1. I mean, it looks different from me, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a very old version of Android too. So,
Well, mine's a little new. I don't know why.
okay,
It asked me if I wanted to update, and I did.
I see. Okay, so this is the really cool part. as you make changes to your screen in the design view of App Inventor, designer view, like I would place a button, which we'll use for programming later on. So drag and drop, and now we have a button in the design view. Now this is just a preview. This is not the actual app running here. This is really just a preview so that you have a general idea of what it looks like. But when I switch to the emulator, oh, it's not updating yet. Okay. It's not updating it. So if something like this happens, it doesn't seem to be working anymore. You can do a reset connection, which basically closes the emulator. You can see how the emulator is now closed. Go back to connect, and then click on emulator again, and that's going to restart the emulator. Now there are several more ways to debug your program. Okay, you can also use Wi-Fi, except the Wi-Fi at school doesn't work, because it requires two devices between your PC and your Android device. They have to be able to see each other and open connections between each other.
Why wouldn't they be able to open connections here at school?
Security.
That is security, yes. So that has to do with security, because at any time we have probably thousands of Android devices.
To buy an Android.
Because you can also use USB and other ways to communicate between the IDE and the Android device.
Well, once you stick the USB into that Android and transfer the data, it's all open to anyone to have.
You can use a USB that way as well. So now you can see how my
Don't buy a Samsung. Nobody buy a Samsung. This is horrible.
that is I respect your opinion.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so this is how you can see that the preview is matching the actual app running on an emulated device. So are we good so far? All right. So for the rest of this class, I'm going to show you, okay, how do we turn this button into a counter? Okay, that's all I want to do. Okay, I just need a counter. Remember that guy, who's standing, at the entrance of Costco, clicking and counting people coming in? I want to make an app just to do that, okay? But I want to use only one button. I don't want to use any labels. I don't want to use anything else. Just one button that can be used for counting and also to reset a counter, okay? And you might think, well, that's a little bit of programming. I mean, it's not seriously programming, but there's logic in it, right? Okay, so how do we do that? So now is the time to switch to the blocks view. Oh, well, let me finish explaining this part first. The components view, or the components pane, gives you the hierarchical display of all the components. Some components can contain other components, like a screen can contain basically all of the other user interface components. A layout can contain other layout, can contain other layout, can contain other user interface elements. So it gives you a hierarchical view of component containment. But more importantly, you can click on a particular component and then go down to these buttons here. You can delete a component or you can rename the component. Because right now it is called button 1, which doesn't seem to suggest what the button is supposed to do. So I can change the name of the button. I would preserve button as a prefix, but I would also change the 1 to something that indicates what it's going to do. Okay, it's used for counting. The last pane, which is the one all the way to the right-hand side, is the properties pane. Whatever you're selecting is the properties of whatever you're selecting in either the components view. Let me finish this first.
Use button count as the name. We used to do that in earlier versions of Visual Basic, but if you have like a huge program you're doing and you keep calling everything button count or button whatever, you're gonna have a hard time finding that when you program for that thing.
So how would you call that?
Count.
Count?
Yeah.
But what if I want to use that as a variable name?
What do you mean? You have to, depends what you're going to program, but this thing is a program, so you don't even need to use a variable name.
There will be a variable.
Fine if you label it button, you can find every button
Yep, because they're organized. You know, the name suggests what it is.
I don't know. If you have a huge, oh, I guess maybe. I don't know. Right?
Okay.
It would give you, like if you have a huge program.
Okay, so the properties pane.
You're gonna see, like you're gonna have to go through the whole list, and all of them are called button, and then you gotta go look for that one thing inside of all the buttons and stuff.
When
If you call it count, all you have to do is look for count, and you don't have to look at all the buttons.
But it can be a label that shows you the value of the counter. It may not be the button that triggers, you know, the up counting. So I'm going to keep it as button count for now. Okay, if you don't like it, change that in your own program. You know, if we have an assignment like this. All right. So getting to the properties pane. The properties pane gives you all the property of the component that is either selected by the components pane or the viewer pane. Okay, so these are the properties that you can change. For instance, if you're dealing with a button, you can change the background color. You can change whether it's enabled, because if you uncheck enable, it's going to be grayed out, and it's not going to interact with the end user. You can also control whether it is, you can control the font, you know, boldface versus italic, the font size, and so on and so forth. All of these can also be changed programmatically. You know, in other words, the code of your program can change that. For instance, well, I'll get to that. Okay,
We don't use a programming language, so how would you code it?
I'll get to that. Okay, so it suffices to say that at runtime, when your app is running, these properties can also be changed. So if you say, you know, from 0 to 10, I want to use a tiny little font. From 11 to 20, I want to use a larger font, and so on and so forth like that. You can do that in your program, okay, in the code of this thing. You can change it dynamically when it's running. So what I'm doing right here is really just, you know, initializing the first value of all of these properties, but they can all be changed when the program runs.
While the program's running?
When the program is running, yes. Okay, so the first thing we will do is to look at the text here. Okay, I'm going to keep it the same like this, which is really kind of not so smart, because right now it says text for button 1. We want it to be a counter. Shouldn't we start with 0, right? Okay, I'll deal with that later. Okay, all right. So now we're going to switch to the blocks view. Okay, so click on blocks, and it switches to the blocks view. And it has two main panes. Okay, the left pane is called the blocks pane, which is kind of like the palette. Okay, it gives you the option of what it gives you the available blocks that you can drag onto the viewer part so they can start programming. So look at blocks as your palette, but it's not a palette of components, it's a palette of control structures that you can drag and drop into the viewer side. The viewer side is kind of like a traditional editor where you can, you know, change the positioning of the blocks. You know, I want this to be inside of that one. I want this one to be before that one. Those can be done in the viewer block, viewer pane. Also pay attention.
I guess I was wrong. You use variables, but
it has variables, yes.
that's weird.
Yeah, and pay attention to your warnings, which is a triangle with an exclamation point in it, and also an error, which is displayed, you know, using a red block. Okay.
Declare the variable.
You do have to declare. Okay. So when you're dealing with a counter app, okay, you need a counter, you know, variable to store the value. Well, okay, there's a shortcut not to do that, but I'm not gonna, you know, do the shortcut here. So what you can do, okay, I need to look at this a little bit. So you can click on the variables block, and it gives you.
It just totally inserted all the stuff in there. It like wrote all the code.
It gives you the available blocks. Okay, it gives you the available blocks. So if I need a global variable.
This is like a template, right? So you stick in a template. It's like what people do when they're writing an essay now. Is they stick in the template. Everything's written in there, and all they do is change a few words, and that's how you code.
Okay, so I'm gonna need I would need a global variable. Let's say I call this counter. Okay, and I want to initialize this to a number. Let's say number 0. So I go to math, I pick up a constant block, and I just stick it here. So when this program starts, it will automatically initialize counter to 0. Okay? This is the initialization block. If you need more variables, you need more initialized blocks. Okay? So all the initialized blocks will run first before the program does anything else. Is that okay? Yeah, go ahead.
You initialize global counter. Is it button counter?
Nope. This is a variable that is completely independent from the button at this point.
Can you tell me what global means?
Global means it is not local, which means every single block within the screen has access to counter.
Sorry, and I also missed how you get the 0 there.
The 0 comes from the math block, so everything is color-coded. Math block is here.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yep. So everything is color-coded. If you see red, it comes from a red block. If you see blue, it comes from a blue category and stuff like that. Obviously, they may not have thought about people who are colorblind. So if you're colorblind, you can write to MIT and say, the choices of these colors is difficult for me, and they can make changes to it. I mean, the whole thing is open sourced. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is to say, it doesn't look right, when we see, text of button 1 as the caption of the button, because we want it to reflect the counter. So what we can do is to go to screen 1. So when you click on screen 1, it will give you all the blocks that are specific to screen 1. Screen 1 is one particular screen. So now you can go through all of these things and say, okay, what are my options? Each one is like an event handler, if you're familiar with that concept. And the words of the block actually tells you how it is supposed to be used. So the first one, the one that I have my hand over, is when screen1 dot back pressed, which basically says you can specify code, action, what you want to do when the back button of the screen is pressed on screen 1. So you can control the behavior. It doesn't have to close the app, for instance. Okay, you can save the data first and then close the app. Okay, so it gives you the option of intercepting the default behavior of this thing here. Yes.
This is like the template, like if you're in school and you want to shoot on an essay, you use the template and all you do is change a few words and you got a whole new essay and stuff.
No.
This kind of program is like cheating on an essay. It's like plagiarism, except you just changed a few words.
Well, in Android, Java programming, you just write a subroutine called, on blah, 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 and then you specify the handler and stuff like that. You can copy and paste it too. It's not different from that. So I'm going to put this block out here. Okay. So this block, my screen just froze for a second. So what this is going to say is okay, when screen 1 initializes, which basically means when the application first starts, okay, I can specify things here. So the first thing I want to do is to make sure the caption of the button shows the counter, not text for button 1, okay? So how do I do that now? Well, because the action that I want to perform is related to the component button count, so I go to the button count category here and say, what can I possibly do with a button? Okay, you can see all the things when a button is pressed, when it gets your focus, I can specify action, but I don't want to do any one of those, okay, because I just want to change the caption or the text on the button. So we scroll down a little bit here, and you can see, oh, I can get the background color, I can change the background color, and so on. But none of this is what I want to do either. I want to change the text on the button. So I scroll down, it's all alphabetically sorted. So I finally get to text. There are two blocks related to the text of a button. The first one allows you to get the current text. So if you want to know what is the current caption on the button, you use this one here, okay? Button count.text. I don't want to do that. I want to change it. I want to change it to 0, to what the counter is, right? So I have to use the second one, which is set button count dot text to, and then gives me a value that I can specify. So I click this one here. This is the one that I want. And then I drag and drop it to the logical place where it's supposed to go. My screen just froze again. I think it is trying to communicate with the server, and it's a little bit slow. Yep.
Is there a way to comment in this?
Yes. That is a very good question. So if you want to comment,
Why would you think you can comment on this?
because sometimes you look at your own code and you do not remember what it is doing or why it's there, I believe it's a right click and then an add comment. So it's actually kind of cool. So when you add comment, it will give you okay. Then you can click on it and then you can type what it is. Okay, so do this to initialize this screen, and you can just kind of leave it there, okay, or you can hide it by clicking the question mark again, so you can show or hide your comments. Kind of cool. But I want to update this to what? Don't tell me 0. Counter, exactly. But I need to get the value of the counter. So what you do now is you go to variables, and you will see get something. So you drag and drop that block here, and then use the drop-down box to say it's the value of the global counter that I want here. So now it would initialize that. Is that okay so far? Cool. So you can also see how these blocks here have this little notch, right? So that's an indicator of what it can connect to. Okay. All right. So this is done. I'm done with initialization. Now when I click the button, when I press on the button, I want it to change the counter, right? I want to increment the counter by 1 and also change the caption of the button accordingly. Okay. So what is causing that action? The clicking of the button, right? Yep, exactly. So we need to look for the component first, and then we say, okay, what can we do about this component? So now we go to button count, and then we find click here, okay? When button count is clicked, okay, I want to specify the following logic. The first thing is I want to increment counter by 1, okay? Incrementing. What do you think incrementing is going to? What is the top action? Yep. It has math, okay, but the top action or the last action is an update of a variable. So it's related to a variable. So I know this is going to be a little bit cumbersome because we have to go to set something to, because we are changing the value of a variable, and then we can select which variable we are changing. Now we have to specify the new value of that variable. It is counter plus 1, okay? So we go back to variable, and we get the value of a variable, but wait, we need to add 1 to it. So we also need to go to math to get the block for adding, and also go to math to get the constant of 1. We can change the constant from 0 to 1. So we drag and drop the 0 here, and here we want to use the global variable counter, drop it into this slot here, and then drop the entire block over here, and don't forget to change the 0 to a 1, because otherwise you won't see any changes, right?
I feel like we're making a puzzle.
It is kind of like a puzzle, yes. Okay, but this is how we write code in App Inventor. There's no syntax to learn, because if things do not match, you can actually type a little bit too. All the logical blocks of any modern programming language is here. Okay.
Right, it's all written in that thing.
Yep.
Just drag and drop everything.
And this is also something you can do. You can duplicate a block, because I need to update the text of the button or the caption of the button to the new counter. So I'm just repeating that action now. So I can just right click on the block, select duplicate, and then pick and then drop the move the duplicate to where it's supposed to go. So now we have a very simple app that can count up, okay? We don't yet have a reset, okay, but it can count up. So let's go ahead and find out, what it looks like when we run this app in the emulator. Now, this is the tricky part of this. When this is already running, so as I write this code here, the app is actually getting updated, but it doesn't go through the initialization again because it has been done already. So if you want to see the full effect of the code that we have just written, you need to reset the emulator, okay? Which is kind of troublesome. Yep.
Is that keep the emulator just running on the side?
It saves you time because every time you reset and start the emulator again, it takes a bit of time. So it depends on your personal preference. If you're only designing the user interface, I would keep it running on the side. But if you're testing something like this where you need to restart the app, to test the full effect of your app, then I would close the emulator before you continue to code. So it all depends on what type of coding you're doing. So we just have to wait a little bit until it brings the app back up. But it will also run the initialization code this time. So when we see the button, it should have a text of 0, not text for button 1 anymore. Okay. And it's getting there. Yep, there you go. Okay, but wait, that just means the initialization is working. How about clicking the button? Well, if you click the button, it goes from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, blah, 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 like that. Okay, but we need a way to reset that counter. What about long pressing the button and use that to reset the counter? Okay, so now we go back to the blocks here, and we go to button count again because long press is an event that is generated by button count. So we go to button count.
If you press the button for a long time, that'll reset the.
Yep, that's the intention. So we're going to use the initialize. I'll just be lazy and reuse this block here, or reuse some of it at least. And then we take this out, okay?
This whole thing is called lazy.
Well, it's not lazy because this is actually taking more work than it is compared to. I prefer to type sometimes. Okay, so if this block is of no use to you, you can toss it. Okay, if I enable the sound, there's actually sound effect too. Like when you drop a block, you'll go like click. When you put it into the trash can, it gives you the trash can lid sound and stuff like that. So it's actually quite entertaining the first time you use it. But after 5 minutes, you will want to turn off all the sound effects. Okay, so I just added this new block here, new event handler. The event is long click. It belongs to button count. And what we want to do when that event happens is to reset the global counter to 0. But there's one more thing I need to do. I need to update the text because otherwise, yep, the counter, which is a hidden variable, is now reset to 0. But the text on the button is still going to be whatever it was before. So I need to copy this block here down to here. There we go. So now we have a counter that is resettable. Okay. So let's go to the emulator and check whether that works or not. So I'm going to long click this button, and it resets to 0. Now, it's a very simple app, okay? And you might argue and say, yeah, this is a really simple app. I mean, taking 10 minutes or so to write this app sounds pretty reasonable. Not if you're using Java with Android Studio, because you will need 10 minutes just to update Android Studio from week to week. There are weekly updates. It is possibly more secure. But this gives you the ability to very quickly get into Android programming. Well, they can hack it. I mean, the whole idea is you're supposed to share your project, which I'll touch on later. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. So let's just say that you wrote an app and you go like, this is really cool. I want to share this with everybody so that everybody can learn, how to do something. So let's go ahead and go back to the projects view here. So we go to the projects view, and then we click on we select the project that we want to share, and then we just click on this button here. It says publish to gallery. So when you're publishing your app to gallery, it's kind of the same thing as uploading a video to YouTube, okay? Except it's not a video, it's an App Inventor app. So once you upload it to the gallery, then everybody who goes to the gallery can see what you describe here, okay? If you say, oh, this is a blah, blah, blah game, and this is how you play the game, but I can only get it to a certain point, I could not finish the coding, somebody can pick up the project. They can get your project with all the source code and continue to work on it. So the idea is the idea of open sourcing, okay? People can just pick up a project that you have published, continue to work on it, or they can fork it, which basically means they can say, I want to take this project to a slightly different direction, but use most of the code base that you have provided. But you can do the same thing. You can go to the gallery and pick up a project and go like, this is a really cool thing, too bad it's not finished, but I think I can help to finish the project. Or I can take it in a different direction and make it a slightly different kind of game. So that's the idea of the gallery, which is a collaborative way of learning, because now you can download the code of somebody else. I have seen some pretty amazing games in App Inventor, including ones where the background scrolls. Just kind of like the old Nintendo games, like Mario Brothers, where the character jumps around, but the background scrolls. You have no idea how difficult it is using just the constructs of App Inventor, but some people got it working. I want to know how to get it working. So I can download it into my projects area. Then I can look at the actual code of that thing, and if I want to work on it, I can work on it too, because the source code is available to me. So that gives you an idea of, there's a lot of resources for you to kind of learn on your own, okay? It doesn't replace my job here, but I kind of look at my job as a tour guide, okay? There's so much to see, okay? If once you learn, how to get to these resources and the main concept of programming in App Inventor, there are a lot of stuff you can do. A lot of stuff that you might think, oh, I bet you cannot do it in App Inventor, but you can. So do we have any questions at this point? No? Okay. So this is really kind of our first class other than Wednesday to really get into App Inventor programming. So I don't really have a homework assignment for you guys just yet. But what you can do is to replicate what I just did. Okay. It's already recorded. Once I turn it from unlisted to public, you guys can watch it like within minutes. So you can watch the whole video again, but I think it's better for you guys just to try it out, okay? Just to say, okay, I'm going to replicate that app of a counter using only these resources. So you will have to at least set up your PC, okay, to get to that point. Or if you decide not to use your own PC, but you want to use a school computer, then you will have to download the zip file that I provide, unzip it into a folder, and then give it a try. So this is basically, today is kind of like a test run of the infrastructure itself, just so that I can make sure that every single one of you here can get into the programming and the running part of your app. Okay. Then on Wednesday, we can actually get started on some other concepts of Android programming. Question? So the way you turn in the homework, okay, so that's a very good question. So the way you turn in your homework assignment is this. So you click on the homework that you want to turn in, you go to projects, and, oh, I guess that's not how we do it. Oh, that it is. Okay, export. Okay, so you click on this, and then you go to project, and then you click on export selected project to my computer, and then you turn in the AIA file. So what this would do is, this is a way for you to back up your project. If you say, I don't trust the Google storage stuff, okay? What if Google comes down and I want to keep my program, right? So this allows you to turn whatever project you're working on into a file that you can save onto your own computer. And that's what I need to grade your program, because what I will do is I'm going to get your AIA file, I'll re-upload it to App Inventor under my name, and then I can either look at the code, I can run it, I can then test it for functionality. Yes?
So we'll have a spot on Canvas to upload that to in your classroom?
When I have homework assignments, yes. So when I have homework assignments, there will be a spot where you upload a file, and then you'll be uploading your AIA file. So I wouldn't even know what account you use to create the AIA file, and I don't need to know, because I just need your project file, and I upload your project file to my folder, I run it under my environment, and I grade it accordingly.
You don't want this, is what you're saying.
I don't want.
You don't want this first project sent to you, right? Or you do? No. Okay.
Yeah, I just need that AIA file that you download.
You do.
Not this one. This is general.
Okay, that's what I was.
So what I need is the file, the AIA file. So let me sort it here. So what I need is just this file. Okay, I know you cannot see it, but I want to move this up. So what I need is just this file that I just downloaded, because that's all I need to reconstruct your project in App Inventor when I sign in as myself. Okay? Yep, go ahead.
The component system in this, does it have like a child parent system built in?
Only certain components has a containment relationship with some other specific components. So in general, you do not have a generalized containment relationship. It also doesn't have the ability to use new. So you cannot just say, at runtime, you cannot just say, I want a new button over here. So all the components must be pre-allocated before your program runs. Now, you can have it hidden. Yep. There are tricks to make it look like that you have more components that you have, but you have to resort to tricks to do that part. Those are very good questions. All right. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. I will go to the lab, and I encourage you, to go to the lab as well, to kind of check out, the instructions today. I'm going to turn the video to public, like right away. So this way you guys will have access to the video like right away. If you are planning to listen to the video, like right after class or something like that, you might want to bring your own headphone, because there's no headphone to check out at the lab. So you will still see the screen, okay, but you won't be hearing me talking about it, or you have to use the computer speaker for that purpose. Okay, so we'll head over to the lab, and I'll see some of you over there.
So I need to buy some headphones?
Hmm?
I can hear it?
Only if you think you need to.
It generates closed captioning after a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, it takes quite a bit of time though.